Unspeakable tragedy, the brutal murder that shook a community. On a quiet Sunday in August 1962, the defiled body of 16-year-old Julian, Julie Wolanski, was discovered in a remote ditch north of Toronto Airport, sparking a fruitless manhunt that would haunt the city. The shy girl from the West End, who had gone missing days earlier, had been savagely raped, beaten, and shot through the heart, her nearly naked form cruelly discarded. Tragically, evidence suggests Julie was held captive for several days before her brutal murder. A local resident recalled hearing a car's brakes screeching nearby on the fateful Friday night. Police would later learn that the person Julie had gone to meet at the Eglinton subway station was an imposter. What makes this case all the more disturbing is the evidence that this may not have been an isolated incident. Reports of other young women being targeted by a man posing as a school official and luring them with similar tactics point to the terrifying possibility that Julia may be the victim of a serial killer. Police were convinced there was a connection with the murder 3 years earlier, when 12-year-old Patricia Lupton of Scarborough had been strangled on her way to what she thought was a babysitting job. That was the first part of this 3-part episode. This is part 2. Explore the unsolved mysteries of Canada with our captivating true crime podcast, Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's true crime podcast. As we piece together the evidence and follow the trail of clues, we invite you to become a part of our mission to solve these perplexing cases. New episodes available every Sunday. Hello, I'm Jay Nickel from Nickel Investigations, and this is the next episode of Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's True Crime Podcast, Season 2, Episode 32, on the murder of Julie Wolanski. Julie's early life. Julie Wolanski was the perfect daughter, the perfect sister, the perfect student. She'd been born in Kielce, Poland, just after the war and brought to Canada as a 4-year-old. She never went out with boys, was known by everyone as a little mother. To her 3 younger brothers, excelled at school. The last year of her life, she'd been on her school's winning citywide relay team. When Julie went to dances at the Polish Veterans Hall at College and Shaw Streets, her parents always drove her home, where they had seen the admiring glances their petite, blonde, and blue-eyed daughter attracted from boys. Men, too, would turn and admire her when she walked by. But now that the family was making a new start in the New World after escaping the misery of war-torn Europe, her parents wanted her to make something of herself, be more than just another young bride. They didn't want any boys turning her head. Yet someone had other ideas. Someone, a madman, coveted Julie. Someone who had inside knowledge of her activities. That someone had tried to trap her before, phoning to say she'd have to return to Given Street School, closed for the summer holidays, to pick up her relay trophy. Julie said she would pick it up when school restarted in September. He set another trap, and it worked. Up next, the investigation. The investigation. This episode is brought to you by Nickel Investigations. The first telephone call to Julie came 10 days before the other 2. Julie's mother was home, and she recalled her daughter telling her the school had phoned and asked her to pick up her relay trophy. These were traditionally given out at the Givens Old Boys Association dinner, but Julie, under strict supervision of her parents, was not allowed to go to it. Whenever she attended a dance held in connection with Polish organizations, either her mother or father were present. Detectives pondered how the man knew the trophy was at the school. The call failed to achieve its purpose. Julie said she would be returning to school in September and would pick up her trophy then. They said the second call came about 2 p.m. and was answered by Julie's stepbrother. He was watching television when the telephone rang. Julie had gone across the street to visit her girlfriend at a grocery store run by her friend Donna's parents. She told her stepbrother, if the school calls them, tell them I'll be right back. Her stepbrother told police the man mentioned the name of Julie's teacher when he asked who was calling. He told her this when she came back, and about a half an hour later, the same man apparently called back. It was a Tuesday afternoon, August 7th, 1962, when Julie got the call. Her parents were at work in a meatpacking plant. One of her brothers was watching television and remembers her having an earnest conversation punctuated with the words, "Yes, sir," and "No, sir." When her mother returned to their Etobicoke home at 4 p.m., Julie was agitated. She said a teacher called to say she'd have to write an exam to graduate to grade 10 in the next school year, although she'd been exempted because her marks were so high. Her mother suggested she wait until the next day when her mother could drive her. "I have to go today, Mommy," her daughter replied. "I have to meet a teacher at Yonge and Eglinton." School records showed Julie got excellent standing in her commercial course and was recommended to grade 10. Julie left that afternoon wearing a white Orion sweater with buttons in front, white sleeveless blouse, green pleated skirt, and flat-heeled brown shoes. She put on nylon stockings, which she seldom wore, and had $10 in her purse. On the dresser in her room, she left a sweet 16 birthday card sent to her by a Polish boy named Jan, and now a sad relic in her homicide file. The text reads, "You're sweet 16 only once, you know. So may this special day be one that you'll remember as just perfect every day. And in the year that's starting and throughout the years to be, may all of your favorite hopes and dreams become reality." Julie's mother gave her daughter 3 streetcar tickets, in case she lost one, and watched Julie walk over the iron bridge from Wallace Avenue to Dundas Street in Toronto to catch a streetcar. It was between 4 and 4:15 p.m. The next time her parents would see Julie was in a mortuary 5 days later. Detective Sergeant Jack Webster was at his birthday party when the call came in at 4:55 p.m. on August 12, 1962. The body of a girl being found in a field beside Indian Line in an area that's now Mississauga. D.S. Webster and his partner arrived at the death scene about 5:40 p.m., and what they saw sickened them. Julie, to her many friends and classmates, was dressed only in stockings and a garter belt. She'd been raped, savagely beaten, and shot through the heart with a .32 caliber bullet from an automatic pistol. Her body being dumped from a car on the highway above and rolled into the tangled undergrowth. Julie's body being spotted by a 17-year-old Linda Wilson of Rexdale, who was out horseback riding. "There's a store window mannequin over there," she called to a male companion. Then their afternoon turned to horror when they realized what they had found. 50 officers searched the surrounding fields for clues. 30 investigators were put on the case. More than 1,300 people were interviewed. Detectives said the body of Julie had been lying in the ditch for at least 3 days. Cab driver Al Murray saw the attractive 16-year-old standing in the northeast corner of the intersection of Yonge and Eglinton at about 6 p.m. on Tuesday, August 7th. He called the police when he read of the murder in the paper. "As soon as I saw the picture and read the description of her purse, I told my wife I had seen her before," he said. "I remember because of the unusual design." Police said they felt sure the taxi driver was correct in his identification because of his accurate description of the straw basket weave purse with a butterfly design. This purse is still missing. She was a pretty girl. She looked worried and nervous. She seemed to be waiting for someone she knew the way she looked. Other police saw her too. A woman told police she'd seen Julie sobbing in the Eglinton Avenue subway station. To them, Police Chief James McKay, the woman said she asked the girl what was wrong but couldn't get a reply. When asked a second time, the girl asked for change for a quarter to make a telephone call. Another woman, too, said she'd seen a crying girl at the newsstand in the station, asking for change of a quarter to make a phone call. Later, a bus driver said he'd seen Julie approach his bus at a stop, falter, and change her mind and step back onto the sidewalk. The next and last person to see her was her killer. Police said the man who lured Julie had surprisingly accurate knowledge of several incidents in her life. It led him to believe he was not a stranger to his victim. Police mentioned the use of the name of her teacher in one of the 3 telephone calls he made. The fact that in the first call on July 27th, he knew Julie's relay race trophy had not been picked up. And the knowledge the caller had that a cram class was being held at North Toronto Collegiate, which pupils can attend to obtain standing they missed during the year. Julie's closest friend Donna recalled that Julian mentioned going to a school on Southampton. This was as nearly as she could remember the street mentioned. Police feel that the caller probably mentioned Roehampton Avenue, where North Toronto Collegiate is located. Detectives immediately were swamped with calls, which for a while poured in at a rate of 35 an hour. One suspect demanded to be given a lie detector test, although such evidence wasn't admissible in Canadian courts. Police had to borrow a polygraph machine from a private company, and the man passed the test. 2 boys her father had seen wave to Julie from a passing car were tracked down, questioned, and released. One of the brothers had dated Julie previously. The teenage brothers, known only as Dan and Bill, were with Julie and a girlfriend on July 8th. At that time, Michael Danek, Julie's stepfather, took the family to a Polish picnic at a park near Highway 7 and Highway 27. On the way back, her brothers followed the family in their car and waved and shouted to Julie. She waved back. It's very possible the park was the Polish Army Veterans Association Park on Highway 27, just south of Major Mackenzie Drive in Woodbridge. This is about 5 miles to 10 miles north of Woodbine Racetrack in the area where Julie was ultimately found. Polish-speaking policemen were stationed in a restaurant where she worked as a part-time waitress, questioning every patron that entered. Motels and cottages near where the body was found were searched for clues. Divers checked every pond for miles around for the missing clothing. The inquiry was so intense, the police were able to catch a flasher who had been exposing himself around Etobicoke for months. But there was no killer. Inspector William McNeely, head of the Metro Police Homicide Squad, said Julie may have been murdered because she knew the identity of her attacker. He said she was raped and killed in another location before her body was dumped, probably sometime on Saturday night. She'd been dead at least 48 hours when found. Dr. Chester McLean, who performed the autopsy, said it was a particularly brutal case of rape. The report said her face was battered and bruised. Police believe it was possible that Julie's body lay where it was found on the Indian Line Road since the day she vanished, but investigators said the killing did not occur there. The chief asked citizens to be on the alert for blood anywhere. A massive internal hemorrhage occurred, and wherever she met her death, there was bound to be considerable blood marks. Police believe Julie's body was kept in a car for 2 or 3 days before being dumped. Largely, the detectives focused on Julie's unaccounted for movements on Tuesday night, Wednesday, and Thursday. At the time, police believe Julie was possibly lured to a motel. Detectives obtained a list of all students and teachers at North Toronto Collegiate where special classes were being held that year for the first time. They'd been held at Jarvis and Parkdale Collegiates for several years. This was being done because police think Julie was told to come to North Toronto Collegiate to take a special test. Caller impersonated her form teacher, a highly respectable man whose whereabouts were definitively established. It appears the killer even knew that Julie's parents both had shift work, and that there was a 2-hour period when both were away from the house. It was then that we made the calls. Detectives followed up leads in Detroit and Buffalo, printed appeals for information in Italian and Ukrainian, asked police in Poland to question 2 people who had just returned home from Canada. One unusual aspect of the case was that Julie's killer used a .32 caliber automatic pistol. Victims of most rapists are strangled with a stocking or scarf. Up next, the suspects. The suspects. This episode is brought to you by Nickel Investigations. Without question, someone has detailed information on Julie. They knew she was exempt from writing exam to get into grade 10. They tried to lure her with this exact detail. Or was the exam actually a physical examination? First suspect, the doctor. Within days of the funeral, police began hearing of a man posing as a doctor with the Board of Education who was phoning teenage girls and saying he had to give them a physical examination. Police believe some of the girls might have kept the appointments and come face to face with the suspect. The man was described as being well-spoken and appeared to have acquired knowledge of his intended victims' academic records by asking their classmates. He was described as between 25 and 35 with a reddish face with acne scars, slightly crossed eyes, slightly protruding ears and Adam's apple, and about 6 feet tall. Among the questions he asked were what types of toothpaste the girls used and whether they wore pajamas or slept in the nude. A Toronto Argonau's majorette got a similar call when her photograph appeared in the paper at the opening of a shopping mall. It was just after her picture appeared in a weekly newspaper that she received the telephone call. So did the director of a modeling agency. One 11-year-old girl was approached at home while her parents were out by a man who said he was a doctor and asked her to undress. This incident occurred approximately in March of 1962, 5 months prior to Julie's murder. Just then a friend called. The man became flustered and said he would call later. No call was received. The North Toronto girl picked the man's picture from police files. He had a record of morals offenses. Police stressed that it was not a positive identification, however. All in all, 80 persons told police of receiving calls from a phony doctor. The next suspect, the murderer of Patricia Lupton. The description of this doctor largely resembled the description of the killer of the subject of last week's episode on Patricia Lupton. In certain respects, the murder of Julie is similar to the murder of Patricia Lupton, both lured by a telephone call and both dumped by a car. On March 9, 1959, 12-year-old Patricia Lupton was abducted and strangled and her body found in Scarborough after answering an ad for a man who phoned looking for a babysitter. One strange aspect was from a girl named Elizabeth Regal. In a strange twist, a 13-year-old girl who police said was a friend of Julie's was reported missing from her Jones Avenue home. Paul Stanowski, a Toronto lawyer, was acting for the girl's mother and said Elizabeth Regal left her home on October 14th. Police noted she could easily pass for 17. Was this just coincidence? There was no more information on Elizabeth Regal. Up next, Never Forgotten. Never Forgotten. Julie's funeral was heart-squeezing drama. Her mother and father sobbed uncontrollably. A boarder in their home threw himself on the coffin. 8 Whiteville girls escorted the casket to its final resting place. Now with her picture locked in time, Julie Wolanski is an old number in an old file. 2 years after her murder, the clues dried up, though a team of investigators kept it as their main case for months. Soon Julie's case will no longer be listed on the Toronto Police Service's online cold case site. They only keep them on the page going back 65 years. There might be few left who remember those cases, but they deserve to never be forgotten. The file is not closed. Murder cases never are. Next week, in the final part of our 3-part trilogy, we'll deal with indecent assault cases from the mid-1940s to mid-1960s, and let's try to figure out together who could possibly be the murderer of Patricia Lupton and Julie Wolanski. Thank you, and please consider subscribing to Ontario Cold Cases, a podcast, Canada's True Crime podcast, available wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.